My company hired an efficiency consultant 6 months ago, and I think she's been systematically destroying people's careers on purpose. Now she's coming for mine. I, 45F, have worked at the same mid-sized logistics company for 11 years. I started as a regional coordinator and clawed my way up to director of operations, which is not a small thing when you consider that when I started, the only other woman at the director level was the HR director, and she was basically decorative. I know this place. I know its rhythms and its politics and where the bodies are buried, sometimes literally in the sense of which accounts we quietly stopped pursuing and why. 6 months ago, our CEO, a guy named Roland who I genuinely used to respect, announced he'd brought in an external efficiency consultant named Petra. She was going to help us identify redundancies and streamline our operational structure going into Q1. He said it like it was exciting. Like we should be grateful. Petra is maybe 32. She has this very specific energy where she's always calm and always smiling, and somehow it makes her more unsettling, not less. She introduced herself at an all-hands by saying she was deeply curious about how this organization breathes, and I remember looking at my colleague Denise across the room. Denise made a face like she'd just smelled something bad. For the first few weeks, Petra mostly observed. She sat in on meetings. She asked questions that seemed innocuous but in retrospect were incredibly targeted. She'd ask someone, "Walk me through why you made that call," in this warm, interested tone, and the person would explain themselves, and she'd nod and say fascinating and type something into her laptop. I didn't think much of it. I've seen consultants before. They come in, produce a report full of jargon, recommend cutting whoever has the least political capital, and leave. I figured I'd keep my head down, be cooperative, and wait her out. Then Marcus got let go. Marcus was our senior logistics analyst. 9 years with the company, genuinely one of the most competent people in the building. The official reason was role restructuring, but that phrase means nothing. What I know is that 2 weeks before his termination, Petra had a one-on-one with him that lasted almost 2 hours. His office is near mine. I saw her go in and clocked when she came out. I ran into Marcus in the parking lot after he'd been told. He looked hollowed out. He said, "She got me to explain the Harmon account situation and I just talked. I shouldn't have talked." The Harmon account was a thing from 4 years ago where a judgment call he made saved the company significant money but technically bypassed a procurement protocol. Nothing sinister. Nobody had ever cared about it. Until apparently now. I didn't connect it to a pattern yet. I thought it was one thing. Then Yolanda in finance got put on a performance improvement plan. Yolanda is brilliant and has about the lowest tolerance for bullshit of anyone I've ever met, which meant she'd been the most openly skeptical about Petra in team settings, substantive pushback, not aggressive, just real. Her PIP cited communication issues and resistance to collaborative process. Yolanda told me the documentation Petra submitted to HR included a paraphrased version of something Yolanda had said in a private conversation with a coworker. Which means someone is reporting back to Petra. Or Petra is doing something I didn't want to think about. Then Dave from IT had a mutual decision to part ways. Dave had been quietly building a case that some of Petra's recommended software changes would create serious data vulnerabilities. He'd written a memo. The memo made it to Roland. 2 weeks later, Dave was gone. I started keeping notes. Dates, names, what I observed. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them, but it felt better than doing nothing. Last month, Petra asked to schedule a one-on-one. We met in one of the small conference rooms, warm, attentive, that slight smile. She asked about my role, my history, what I felt were the biggest operational challenges we faced. I was careful. Vague but not evasive. Toward the end, she said, "I want to ask you something, and I hope you'll take it in the spirit it's intended. Do you feel like your current role reflects your actual ceiling here, or do you think there's been some friction that's held you back?" I didn't answer immediately. The question is perfectly constructed. It's an invitation to either validate yourself in a way that sounds arrogant, imply that someone at the company has wronged you, or say everything is fine in a way that can later be framed as lacking ambition or self-awareness. There's no clean exit. I said, "I think I've had a lot of opportunity here and I've made the most of it." She smiled and typed something. On the way out, she said, "I really admire how long you've been here. 11 years is such a commitment. I just want to make sure the company is honoring that appropriately." I said, "Thank you." I felt sick. That was 3 weeks ago. This past Monday, Roland's assistant sent me a calendar invite for a meeting with Roland, Petra, and someone from HR named Glenn. Subject line, operational review, director level. No agenda attached. I've seen 2 of those invites go out to other people before they were let go. I called Denise that night. "Did you get an invite for Friday?" She was quiet, then, "No. Just you?" "Just me." I asked her directly if Petra had talked to her about me. A pause. She said Petra had asked a few general questions about team dynamics, whether I had strong buy-in from my team, whether she'd ever seen me struggle with a particular type of decision. Denise said she'd tried to shut it down. I believe her. Denise is not my enemy. But the fact that Petra was asking those questions meant she'd been building something for a while, and I'd watched her do it to 3 other people and still ended up surprised when she turned it toward me. Marcus is gone. Yolanda is on a PIP. Dave is gone. The one thing they all had in common, besides being genuinely good at their jobs, is that each of them had something, a moment, a decision, a paper trail, that could be made to look bad if you wanted it to. 11 years gives everyone things like that. There is one other thing I haven't told anyone. About 2 months ago I found something, not snooped for, just stumbled onto, that I think might explain why Petra operates the way she does and who's actually benefiting from the people she removes. I haven't done anything with it yet because I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I'm starting to think I need to figure that out before Friday. Update 1. Friday happened, and I've been sitting in my own driveway for 40 minutes and I can't make myself go inside yet. The meeting was not a termination. It was not a PIP. It was something I didn't predict, which almost never happens to me and I don't love that about today. Roland was at the head of the table, projecting warmth with his eyes already somewhere else. Glenn had a legal pad and that expression HR people learn somewhere, neutral, faintly sympathetic, communicates nothing. Petra was across from me with her laptop open and her hands folded on top of it, that slight smile. Roland said they were restructuring the director tier and that my role as director of operations was being, he used this specific word, evolved. Not eliminated. Evolved. My current responsibilities would be redistributed across 2 new positions, and they were offering me a new role, Senior Director of Operational Continuity. I said, what does that mean? Petra said, it means exactly what it sounds like, you'd be the institutional anchor. The person who makes sure nothing gets lost in transition. Institutional anchor. I have been here 11 years, and she called me an anchor like that's a compliment and not a thing that keeps a boat from going anywhere. I asked about compensation. Lateral with long-term growth potential. Same pay, with the possibility of more someday, which in corporate language means never. I asked who the 2 new positions would report to. A newly created VP of Operations role. I asked who was being considered for it. Both internal and external candidates. I said, am I being considered for the VP role? A pause. Not long, but not nothing. Roland said, the continuity role really is designed around your strengths. I didn't say anything. 11 years has taught me that silence in a room like that makes people nervous, and nervous people fill space, and what they fill it with is sometimes useful. Glenn said, we want to make sure you feel valued in any transition. Petra said, I've actually been really impressed by how you see the whole system. That's rare. That's what this role is meant to honor. I looked at her when she said that. She held my gaze completely steady with that slight smile, and I thought, not for the first time, that I genuinely cannot tell if she believes what she's saying or if she's so good at this that the question doesn't apply to her anymore. I said I needed time to review the formal offer. Roland said of course. I shook hands with everyone and walked out and sat in my office for 20 minutes just recalibrating. Because this is different from what happened to Marcus or Dave. They were removed. I'm being rearranged. Moved to a box that sounds important and means nothing, while someone else steps into the operational authority I've spent 11 years building. I can't tell my story as they let me go because technically they didn't. I can't say I was pushed out because technically I was offered a promotion and title. The documentation will look generous. And I'll either take it and become irrelevant, or reject it and leave voluntarily and they won't owe me anything. I called Denise from the parking lot. She picked up on the first ring, she'd been waiting. When I told her, she was quiet, then said, that's actually a much smarter way to do it than what they did to Marcus. She's right. It is smarter. I still haven't told anyone what I found 2 months ago. But I think I'm starting to understand one more piece of it. The VP of Operations role that doesn't exist yet. The one they're exploring candidates for. I think I know who that candidate is. And I don't think it's internal. Update 2. It's been 9 days since the meeting. I haven't accepted the offer and I haven't rejected it. Glenn has emailed twice, very politely, to ask if I have questions about the documentation. That buys time, but not unlimited time. I need to stop being vague about what I found, because keeping it closed isn't useful to me anymore. We use a project management platform company-wide. About 2 months ago I was pulling documentation on a vendor contract and ended up in a shared folder I'd been given access to through a cross-departmental project. The folder was called Q1 Structural Planning, and I'd assumed it was routine budget work. It was not just that. Inside was a document, an org chart, dated about 3 weeks before Petra arrived. Before she arrived. It was a proposed structure for what the company would look like post-efficiency review. And the VP of Operations box at the top of a restructured chain had a name in it. Not my name. Not anyone who currently works here. I googled the name. 4 minutes later I'd found a LinkedIn and a comment thread in an industry forum where someone from a previous company was describing what happened after their consultant came through, half the ops department gone within a year, an outside person brought in to fill the vacuum. Same pattern. Different company. Same consultant. I sat on this because I didn't know what it meant. Was Petra hired specifically to clear a path for this person? Was Roland in on it, or was he a victim of his own decision, thinking he'd hired a real consultant? I couldn't figure out the shape of it. What I think now, and this is just my read, is that Roland knows. I think he made some kind of arrangement to bring in new leadership at the VP level and use the efficiency review as the mechanism to make room. The people who got removed weren't random. They were specifically in the way. What I don't know is what Roland is getting out of it. Whether it's financial, or whether someone convinced him the company needed new blood and this was the cleanest way to get there. I don't know. Here's what I did this week. I reached out to Marcus. We weren't close, but I texted him and said I was thinking about him. He called me back that evening. We talked for almost an hour. I told him what I'd found, not everything, but enough. He went quiet for a long time, then said, I knew it wasn't about the Harmon account. I knew that wasn't real. He sounded exhausted. I asked if he'd talked to a lawyer. He had consulted one but hadn't pursued anything because he had no documentation. I said, what if there was documentation? A beat. Then, what do you have? I said I wasn't sure yet what it was worth, but that I was going to figure it out before I gave them my answer. He said, be careful. Not like, be a coward. I mean actually be careful, because I wasn't, and I lost. I've been careful for 11 years. I've been so careful. I'm starting to think careful is the wrong gear for this particular moment. Update 3. I asked Roland for a meeting. Just Roland, not Petra, not Glenn. I told his assistant it was about the offer and that I had questions before giving my formal response. True. Not the whole truth. He agreed. We met yesterday morning in his office, which is his territory, and it usually matters. I've always been good in his office. We have history. He did his warm thing when I walked in, coffee, how are you, how's the family? I let it run. Then he said, I know the offer probably wasn't exactly what you were expecting, but I want you to know how much you're. I said, Roland. I found the Q1 structural planning folder. The warmth didn't leave his face immediately. It took about 2 seconds. That 2 seconds told me a lot. He said, I'm not sure what you mean. I said, I'm not here to threaten you. I want you to know that right now. I'm here because I've worked here for 11 years, and I would like you to just tell me the truth about what's happening so I can make an actual decision about my life. He looked at me for a long moment. He picked up his coffee cup and set it down without drinking from it. How long have you had that? 2 months. And you didn't, he stopped. He was recalculating. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I'm sure now. He leaned back and pressed his thumb against his bottom lip, staring at the middle distance, something he does in board meetings when someone asks something he didn't prepare for. Buying time. He said, the VP role is real. This isn't something sinister. The board has been pushing for a restructure at the operational level for 2 years. Petra was brought in to facilitate a transition that was going to happen regardless. I said, was the person in that org chart always the plan? He said, there was a preferred candidate identified early, yes. Before Petra even arrived. He didn't deny it. And Marcus? And Dave? He looked genuinely uncomfortable. Whether that was conscience or performance, I couldn't tell. He said, Petra's process is, I've trusted her assessment of what the organization needs. I said, Marcus's termination was based on a 4-year-old procurement decision that you and I both know was the right call at the time. He started to say the Harmon situation was more complicated. Roland. I said his name the way you say someone's name when you want them to stop performing. I'm not recording this. I'm not going to march into the board meeting with a folder. I just want to know if there's an actual place for me in this company's future, or if I'm being managed out and you'd like me to do it quietly. The longest pause of the whole conversation. He said, I think you're one of the most capable people in this building. I said, that's not what I asked. He said, the continuity role was designed to retain you. I said, it was designed to retain me somewhere I'm not a threat to whoever is coming in. He didn't say anything. I said, okay. And I stood up. He said, what are you going to do? I told him I hadn't decided yet. I drove to a coffee shop and sat there for 2 hours. I texted Marcus that the conversation had happened and I'd call him later. He sent back a question mark and then a thumbs up. I have until end of week to respond to the offer. I have a screenshot of that org chart that I emailed to my personal address 2 months ago because some part of me already knew I might need it. I have a conversation Roland will deny if it ever comes to that. And I have 11 years of knowing where the bodies are buried. Update 4. I rejected the offer on Thursday morning. Sent the email at 7:52 a.m. before I could second guess myself, short and professional. I was grateful for the 11 years, I wish the company well, my last day would be in 3 weeks per my contract. No drama. No accusations. Just done. Glenn called within the hour to ask if I wanted to discuss alternatives. I said there wasn't anything to discuss. He said he understood and that they'd be in touch about the transition documentation. I called Marcus that afternoon and told him. He was quiet for a second, then said, "Okay. What's next?" Here's what's next. The lawyer Marcus had consulted, employment attorney, handles wrongful termination, agreed to take a meeting with both of us. We went together last Tuesday. I brought the screenshots of the org chart, my notes from the past 6 months, and a documented timeline of the departures. Marcus brought what he had, which wasn't much, but his own account corroborated the pattern. The lawyer was measured about what we had. The org chart was suggestive but not conclusive on its own. It could be argued that having a preferred candidate in mind before a restructure isn't inherently wrongful. What strengthened the case, she said, was the pattern, the specificity of who was removed, the pretextual nature of Marcus's stated reason for termination, the documentation Petra submitted in Yolanda's PIP that appeared to include information from private conversations. She said Yolanda needed to be part of this conversation. I reached out to Yolanda that same evening. She picked up and I talked for about 10 minutes before she stopped me and said, "I've been waiting for someone to call me about this for 4 months. She's in." I'm not going to say more about the legal piece right now, because the lawyer told me not to. What I will say is that it exists and it's moving. The thing I keep coming back to is Petra. She's still in the building. She is, as far as I know, still doing exactly what she does, sitting in on meetings, asking her warm targeted questions, typing notes into her laptop. Some new version of Marcus is probably explaining himself to her right now and doesn't know what that means yet. I don't have a way to stop that in the short term. I've thought about it a lot. The lawyer says the most effective thing I can do right now is not make noise that tips them off before there's something formal to stand behind. So I'm not making noise. My last day is in 2 weeks. I've been training someone on the handover materials, a genuinely nice woman named Priya who has no idea what she's walking into, and I feel bad about that, but there's a limit to what I can do. I gave her my personal email and told her to reach out if she ever had questions, and I meant it in a way she didn't fully understand yet. I've had a lot of people stop by my office. Some of them say the standard things: keep in touch, you'll land somewhere great, let me know if you need a reference. A few of them, when they close the door first, say something else. One guy from the regional team said, "I just want you to know that what they did is bullshit," and looked like he might actually cry, and I had to tell him it was okay even though it isn't entirely. Here's the honest part. I don't know if the legal thing goes anywhere. Employment law is slow and outcomes are uncertain, and even a strong pattern isn't a guarantee. I know that. Marcus knows that. Yolanda, who is the most clear-eyed person I've ever met, has told us both directly that she's not doing this for the money, she's doing it because she wants there to be a record. That's probably the right way to frame it. What I do know is that I'm not the person who sat in that parking lot 2 months ago wondering whether I was catastrophizing. I was not catastrophizing. I saw what I saw, and I said so, and I didn't do it quietly. That part is already done regardless of how anything else turns out. Roland sent me an email yesterday. Just 3 sentences. He said he respected my decision, that he hoped I knew my work over the years had genuinely mattered, and that he wished me well. I read it twice. I believe the middle part. The man is not a monster, he's just someone who made a set of choices and let a process run that he probably told himself was more neutral than it was. That doesn't make it fine. It just makes it recognizable. I'm going to be okay. I have savings, I have a network, and I have 11 years of knowing how operational systems actually work, which turns out to be something people will pay for. I had 2 conversations last week with people I used to work with at other companies. I'm not panicking. But I do keep thinking about Dave's memo, the one about the data vulnerabilities, the one nobody acted on after they pushed him out. Whatever software changes Petra recommended are still in place. Whatever risks Dave flagged are still sitting there unaddressed. I sent an anonymous tip to the company's internal compliance line before I wrote this. Just the facts, just the document reference, no name attached. Whether anyone does anything with it is not up to me. I've done what I can do. I'm going to go finish packing my office now.